Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, thanks for joining the Win with Dice podcast. It's a podcast all about tabletop RPGs. Today we're talking about Starfinder. Calvin's got his eyes on the Starfinder cinematic ship combat rules.
Indeed.
I guess, I don't know if there's any other ways to use a ship other than combat, but we'll see.
We will indeed.
This is your first time listening to the Win with Dice podcast. Thanks. We like to talk about the games that we run, the games that we play, and the cool, wonderful people we get to experience a hobby with. Sometimes we interview some TTRPG folks. Sometimes it's just us chatting about the games that we run and some cool, interesting ideas. A lot of times we just do a lot of brainstorming too. Those episodes are really fun. So if that's your jam, please give us a subscribe, give us a like. We also read all of your comments, so if this video has any comments on it, I'll make sure to read it and respond to it. If you think the ship combat rules Calvin's going to tell me about are cool, you guys probably already know it already, but we'll see.
There's actually surprisingly little conversation, at least on YouTube, about these specific rules. And I think they're interesting enough that people should at least be trying them, but it could just be how recently the book was out. But hopefully we can fill that space on YouTube at least.
Yeah. Here comes the show, folks. But I guess, Calvin, this is your line.
Oh, yes, of course. Before we get into all that fun stuff, we have to get to the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week.
Yes, the Win with Dice Weekly GM Tip of the Week. You guys tell us if it's the most important show for you, part of the show for you. You know what I mean? Like, I wanna know for sure. But I was speaking to Trey the other day, and he was like, yeah, I've listened to it every single time, at least that part. And I was like, you don't watch the whole thing? He's like, yeah.
That's why it's the most important part.
Yeah. but yeah. Thanks, Calvin. What do you got for us today, man?
Okay, so this is something we've probably talked about before, but it was a conversation I had come across recently, and it's just something in my mind, which is usually what we do for Tip of the Week. And it was sort of the difference between a rules lawyer and the term I saw was rules reference player, but it really could be anything. But it's just someone who, I mean, I know for sure we've talked about this before, because I have had players in my games who, like, they're very familiar with the rules, and I know if I ask a question, they will have an answer, or I can refer to them if I can't figure something out, or just say, like, you know, if you could check that while I'm trying to do something else. And I think I think rules lawyers get a bad rap, and it might just be that specific term or that specific name, but I feel like there's a lot of room for a player who is very familiar with the rules, but isn't using that to sort of override the GM, but instead to help the GM. Like for me, if I know a rule and I see a situation where it's not being applied, or the GM isn't sure what it is, like I kind of prefer to wait until they ask for help instead of just interjecting. But I feel like having players who know the rules or running games for other GMs, really, I think there's a lot of good in that. And I don't know, I'm just coming out here to defend rules lawyers because I like when my players are familiar enough with the rules that I don't feel like I'm flying off on my own, if that makes sense.
Well, it's like that security, right? I think also too, a lot of rules lawyers, well, at least if they're coming from the helping the GM or helping the players at the table kind of thing versus like trying to win. I think that also a lot of GMs fall into this category as like rules reference players, RFPs or RPs. Whatever. Yeah, good acronym. So the RRP, right? Like they're really good to assist you, especially for new GMs out there. When Calvin started GMing, like obviously I probably was a rules person. I mean, at least I gave you the confidence. I would just say like just run with it and you'd believe me, but I had no clue. You see somebody like that, right?
My illusions shattered.
I know. Even if you are a player, you're always a GM. Like, yeah, don't let them see behind your curtains. I got lots of them.
Yeah, that's the most important rule.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good thing too. I think there's like this like classic like hardcore player who's like everything's by the rules, and I made this cheeky character to like exploit this loophole and stuff like that, or like when the rules only matter when it's not going their way, right? Like that kind of person, which I don't know. People keep saying that these people exist, but like I've never ran into them in my life. So I guess I'm just lucky.
Yeah, we do, again, like, everything we say comes with the caveat of that we have really great friends to play games with.
And like not everybody has the opportunity to do that. But if you are playing with a bunch of assholes, hey, there's like lots of people out there in the world. So
Yeah.
And also maybe just don't play TTRPGs with these dudes. Maybe play like board games or something where like the goal is to win, right? If you have like you don't need to always just like have like a fun experience. And sometimes it's cool to get dirty with your friends playing a board game, right? Like, get sweaty. I'm down for it. But just the context matters.
Yeah, I think it has come up in the podcast before, but there are definitely people that, like, you can do other stuff with, but you can't play tabletop RPGs with for whatever reason. Like, you can still be friends with them, you can still do other things, but, like, certain specific hobbies just don't really fit with that group of people.
I think it's just that, like, the TTRPG experience is just kind of like a board game where sometimes you get to make up the rules. Or like, it's just, like, more vibes, right? Like... It's vibes the board game for the most part. And then when somebody just inserts bad vibes, then it throws the whole thing off. But like, there's structures and rules and stuff in just other games that you can play. Mm-hmm. So like just do that, right? Like no one's going to be mad if someone double crosses you in Risk or like Catan or something, because that's like half of the game. Or like you're playing Coup, you're going to get lied to. Like that's it, right? You know what I mean? Like you can play dirty. And that's the point. I guess it's like the secret second tip. Just go play some board games with your friends. Like it's good too. Like you don't have to always play TTRPGs or whatever you're doing. You can do a lot of things with your friends.
Yeah, and that extra structure might help in certain cases or with certain groups of people.
Yeah. I guess we're kind of off topic for the tip of the week. But
that always
to
happens.
Summarize, RRPs are good, right? Those rule reference players are good to have. You should promote them. They're not rule lawyers. And that if someone is being a rule lawyer, they're probably just being a kind of a douche in general. So don't worry about them.
Yeah, as always, it's probably indicative of a larger problem that isn't just tabletop based.
Yeah, it's relationship based.
All right, well, let's hop into the episode proper. First off, I had mentioned, I think it was a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, time is weird, as we're catching up on just some Starfinder news, because we're doing a Starfinder episode. There were some companion trailers for Starfinder Afterlight, an upcoming party-based RPG in the Starfinder universe. The Kickstarter for that's going to be launching on October 7th of this year. So about a week from when you're hearing this episode. So far, we've seen 4 of the possible companions. I don't know how many there will be, but we've seen 4 of them. There is Cole Stryker, the coolest sounding one. A Vesk soldier who, despite pressure to join the war, he left the military to chase his dreams of being an action star. And he's voiced by Fred Tatsiori. There's Taiko, a Yisoki operative, who was once a promising inventor, but disappointment and betrayal hardened him into a shady operative. And he's voiced by Inel Tomlinson. There's Lu323, an android envoy, who was once this elite stealth agent, but was captured on a mission gone wrong, and then her personality was reshaped by infosphere drama shows, which I think is a fascinating idea.
Oh man. That's wild.
It's very wacky. It's very Starfinder. And she's voiced by Melissa Medina. And lastly, there's Sterling, a human Bore Solarian, which is hard to say 5 times fast, who was brought back to life after a painful death and driven to rediscover the secrets of his past, and is voiced by James Alexander.
With cool space magic powers. Yes, tale as old as time.
Indeed.
I was also a guardian once.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting character ideas there. A lot of cool voice actors who have been around in a bunch of different video games. I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this podcast comes out, we get a trailer, but it might drop when the Kickstarter launches. So if that's the case, then we'll talk about it whenever we get a chance.
All right, Kevin, tell me about these ship rules.
All right, let's get into it. So, Starfinder GM Core, it's been out for about a month or so. It's got a lot of stuff that's very similar to the Pathfinder 2nd Edition GM Core book, because of course each system needs to be able to be played on its own. Like, you don't need to have either book to play either system, or the opposite book, I should say.
Yeah.
There is a bunch of new stuff in this book, however, like hacking rules, But the main thing for me was the starship combat. That was one of my favorite elements of Starfinder First Edition. I recognize some people didn't like it, but some people are, I mean, it's okay if people are wrong. I don't mind, the world's a big place. Let's get into this cinematic starship combat. The basics of it remain the same. The PCs have to work together on a starship and they take on different roles. However, instead of only involving combat, it can involve other challenges, like chases through an asteroid field or scanning a planet while it's near a black hole. They function similarly to complex hazards, which are in Pathfinder and Starfinder. Complex hazards are essentially traps, but with turns. They will roll initiative, and they have some sort of automatic function each round. The water trap that I had very famously used in our Fates Here campaign was a complex hazard where each turn it would start filling with more water as players were trying to escape this hazard.
Well, Calvin tried to TPK us with just water. It turns out the scariest thing you could do is just drown your players. Like, like that, all your AC and hit points, they mean nothing.
Yeah.
In the face of water.
Try to swing your sword out of this.
Yeah. Take that, you damn fighter.
But yeah, they function in the same way, where they're sort of like an automated thing with like a handful of very specific actions. The Cinematic Starship Scenes have a stat block. It's a pretty lengthy stat block because it includes details on the PC ship. It includes the threats like enemies and hazards, and it includes the victory condition of the encounter. Of course, because it's an encounter, it has turns and initiative, and it operates in that way. Before the start of a starship scene, the players will choose what role they want to take on the ship, and the roles will be very familiar. They're pretty much the same ones from first edition. And those roles can also be changed at the start of each round. Some roles can be taken on by multiple PCs. It depends on what is available in the ship. When we get into it, I'll describe that a bit more. Of course, each role is going to give access to different special actions like piloting maneuvers or counter-hacking or magic rituals while you're flying the ship. PCs will still have 3 actions per turn, and most starship actions during your turn, it'll require 2 actions to use. So that leaves you a bit of space to do things like aid another player, or like 1-action spells, or even character level combat if someone is boarding the ship. Enemy ships, however, they don't have crew actions this time around, or at least currently, but instead they have like routine functions similar to a complex hazard. And then PCs can of course get experience from doing these encounters. The experience is pretty similar to hazards or monsters of that same level. You do still get the experience regardless of outcome. And then from there we get into the actual stat blocks. So these are pretty lengthy stat blocks. I'll put like an example of one on screen. But you have your scene name and the level of it, any traits of it, and then the victory conditions. And that's your basic stuff like, you know, you reduce your threat to 0 hit points, or you get a number of victory points, or you survive for a number of rounds, whatever that may be. And then the additional objectives, if there are optional objectives that are like, you don't need to win if you get these, but they would give you some sort of extra reward. There's the description for the player starship, the roles that are available on it, and how many of each role can be taken. So when you look at the starship sheet, it'll have like engineer 2 or something like that, just to show that you could have 2 engineers. There's starship bonuses, which are the skill bonuses from the starships. So you get like an item bonus of computers +1 or piloting +1 or something like that. There's the AC and saving throws for the ship, and then the HP and shields from the ship, as well as how much shield is recharged per round. And shields are basically like temporary hit points. There are a list of starship actions if that encounter has specific actions for you to do outside of what you normally can. Then there's the threat, its stats like initiative, skills, AC, HP, weaknesses, immunities, that sort of thing. Whatever its routine is per turn, and then any special actions it can take, if applicable. And then it also will include, if there's a way to end the encounter outside of the victory condition, like if you run out of time or something, then that'll be included on this very lengthy stat block as well. And then we can break down what all of that actually means. So when you're building a starship, I feel like starship seed is very hard to say. I'm just gonna... That's one thing. Cinematic Starship Scene is very hard to say.
Yeah. It's like a CSSSS.
Doesn't really roll off the tongue, more like it trips off the tongue.
Do a barrel roll. That's what you should do. Off the tongue. Yeah, it is pretty tough. So yeah, the space battles.
The space battles. The space battles. So when you are building your space battles, you have to consider your victory conditions. Again, this is just how PCs will succeed at the encounter, or how you measure that success. It can involve a victory point system, which is something that is also presented in Pathfinder GM Core. It's just basically the PCs gain or lose points depending on the outcome of certain rolls. Pretty straightforward. There could also be multiple possible victory conditions, depending on how you want to build the encounter. And of course, it can end based on a certain amount of turns, or if the enemy is successful at something, whichever direction you want to go in. And as well, there are additional objectives which can give you bonus rewards, but not contribute to actual victory. As for the player starships, the roles are the ones you're familiar with. You have your captain, your engineer, your gunner, your magic officer, your pilot, and your science officer. Not every ship will have every role. The ship might be too small for certain roles, or it did give the example that an organic ship might not need a mechanical engineer.
Yeah, it would be like a veterinarian, right? Like
yeah, pretty much.
The ship's vet.
That would. Yeah, that's where the role would be filled in. When you're building these encounters and you're building the player starships, generally there should be at least 4 roles available, because that's what they assume the average party size is, with space for up to 6 or 8 other characters depending on the size of the ship. And of course, as I said before, some scenes will have unique ship roles. The player starships will, as I said, have different bonuses to different skills. This is a way for you to distinguish what type of ship it is. They're usually treated as item bonuses on those roles. So if a player is getting guidance as well, then that can stack, which is pretty nice. The ship will have an AC, which, it functions like an AC. When building ships, you can use the AC from the Building Creatures table, which is in both the Starfinder and Pathfinder GM Core books. There's a table that's just like different levels of creature, and then it has, moderate HP or extreme HP, or moderate saving throws or extreme saving throws or low saving throws, that sort of thing. You can use those stats when determining the ship stats for AC and saving throws and HP and even shields. There's the starship actions, if there's unique actions. And then there's just, in the book, there's some general guidelines when designing player starships. Just things to keep in mind. Like, if the HP is high, then the AC can be low, or vice versa. I do make a note of this later, but I don't know how I feel about... Well, I don't want to be too... I generally like a lot of this. But one thing that stood out to me, which I'll just mention now because I'm talking about the player starships, is that the player starship is built as part of the encounter stat block, rather than being something that the PCs have, Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I feel like the starship, that should be... the ship should be as much part of the crew as anything else, right? That should be the player's unique space. That should be their home, essentially. So I don't really like the vibe of it being part of the encounter stat block, rather than its own separate thing the players bring into the encounter.
I think it could also just be ease for when, to be fair, sometimes you just have to jump into the Millennium Falcon and you don't really know. This isn't your ship. It's just a ship, but people are shooting at you, so you gotta go fly it. That might be a thing.
True. Yeah, no, it definitely applies in that situation. I think maybe it's just the tropes that I prefer. I like the idea that the players have a ship and that ship has its own personality and it's just part of the crew. There's something about this ship that represents the people that use it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, you can just make note of the ship stats that you've made before and use them in different encounters, so that's entirely possible.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
I think that's totally reasonable, too. But I would say that's also probably coming later in a book or something.
Yes, it is for sure.
Sounds like a free Paizo book to me.
I had made a note of it, but this book does give away that there will be rules for customizable starships and tactical starship encounters in the Starfinder Tech Core book.
There you go.
And I'm assuming that's where we'll also get the Mechanic and Technomancer classes, because those aren't in the core book as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, so just again, going back to building these stat blocks, you have the threats, you put in the name, the description, the relevant stats, again, using the same building creature tables and operating at the scenes level. A lot of these things will function the same way as you would with constructing PC ships. Although, if you were dealing with, like, say you wanted the threat instead of one singular enemy ship, you have multiple different ones. What you can do is break that down and, like, divide the HP between each enemy unit. So, say, at a certain level, the threat should have, like, 60 hit points. You can instead divide that into 15 hit points for 4 different ships, and then the threat is like 4 different enemy ships you have to deal with. Basic, straightforward stuff like that. So the book then gets into some examples of starships, everything from a small fighter up to a battleship. I do kind of wish we had a bit more... everything I was kind of wishing at this point was just... I have to wait for the customizable starship rules.
So really, this is just a test of patience, Calvin.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I like the function of this, I just wish there was more customization to it and more adaptability. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to get that. So it's fine for now. Like, it's going to happen. I don't know, it's hard to criticize something that I know is solved. But there are some examples of other ships. There's more detail on the roles. So again, you have your captain, who is there for instruction and inspiration and guidance and demoralizing the enemy. There's the engineer, who was the technical expert and does power management and repairs. There's the gunner, who does the guns. They do the targeting and firing of weapons. There's the magic officer, which I think it's very Starfinder to have that as a role on the ship. But you have a magic officer who manages like the mystical systems and does scrying or rituals as necessary. You have the pilot, which does the piloting, the science officer, which does computers and sensors, and then any niche roles that are specific to encounters. And those encounters can be like ship attacks, they can be racing or dealing with rival corporations, they can be asteroid fields or planet atmospheres, they can be magic effects like a living landscape, or megafauna like dragons. So they don't necessarily have to be combat specifically. Again, it can be pretty much anything, and however you track the victory points, or the victory condition, I should say, that determines what kind of a counter it is. So it's all very narrative-based. It's a little similar and different to the narrative Starship Combat that Starfinder First Edition had, although I kind of like this one a bit more than that, just because it feels more like it doesn't feel as much like it's trying to be a mix of different things. It feels closer, I guess, to a regular combat. And then, yeah, each thing will have its own rewards and consequences. I think generally the intent is that failure should not be a TPK, because a player ship at 0 HP, it's disabled, but it's not destroyed. So there could be a follow-up from there, like maybe the players have to go into a ground combat, or they can lose intel or something like that. They might be at a disadvantage in the next encounter, or the enemy might have an advantage. Just, any other consequence. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that the players all die. But again, that depends on the actual encounter you're building. Like if the encounter is escaping a black hole or whatever. Well, it is space fantasy, so a black hole is basically a portal to wherever.
Yeah, it's the magic, like, bizarre world. I'm sure we're gonna get bizarre Superman from the new one.
Probably.
Spoilers, I guess. Probably.
So, yeah, we can take a quick look at an actual example of a starship scene. So I'm looking at the GM Core book on page 232, and the example given is a level 2 starship scene called Asteroid Ambush, where the PCs are on a starship, they're scanning an asteroid field, and they're suddenly ambushed by the Corpse Fleet, the fleet of undead hailing from Eox. I'll put this on screen as well for people to see, but you can see that it lists the name, the level, the description, and the victory conditions, which is reducing the HP of the Corpse Fleet ship to 0, or if you've managed to escape the asteroid field. It gives the description of the ship, it gives the roles on the ship, you have your engineer, you have 2 gunners, you have 2 pilots and a science officer. The starship bonus is computers +1. I do wish there was a bit more guidance as to what the bonuses should be. If there was, I missed it, but I kind of wish it gave a bit more guidance for that. It's a very loose, like, narrative-based thing, and I like the freedom of that, but I also, like, I mean, I don't know. Again, I just wait for the rules. I just wait for the tactical Starship customization and combat rules.
Yeah. Cal was like, I don't know what to do.
I'm
just gonna do something and I hope I don't kill my players. Oh no.
Not again.
Not again.
But yeah, you get your ship bonuses, your ship, your stats, your AC, your saving throws, your HP, your shields, everything there. The stat block does include essentially the weapons on the ship. So this particular ship has a mining laser, and it gives you the damage for that, who uses it. The gunner uses it using the martial weapon stat. So if you're trained in martial weapons, then you use that for your mining laser. As well, it has different actions you can take. So you can avoid asteroids for 2 actions on your turn. Either the pilot or the science officer can do that. Of course, the pilot will do piloting, and the science officer will use computers to navigate through the asteroid field. The engineer can take 2 actions to do repairs. The pilot can take 2 actions to do a tactical withdrawal. And these things can add a number of points to help escape the asteroid field, or you can try to take down the enemy ship. And then next in the stat block is the enemy ship. It gives a description of it, what its initiative is, any applicable skills, because the ship does have to deal with the threat of the asteroid field as well. This is one particular thing that you can use for balance. Like, you can introduce a threat that applies to both the players and the enemy ships, and that way the balance isn't shifted too far one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So the Corpse Fleet ship, it will use an action to try to outmaneuver the PCs, so it needs to do a piloting check. Again, it gives this routine thing that if you look at the stat block for a complex hazard, you've basically seen it before. So it's pretty easy to just automate through what this thing is doing every turn. And it's pretty straightforward compared to how Starship encounters worked previously.
Yeah, they were like a whole game on its own. Like, you just stopped playing Starfinder, and then you just played it. You played the Starfinder combat where, you got the grid out, you move just stuff around. More like, what's that game? X-Wing Fighters. I want to say that's what it's called. The Star Wars ship battling war game. It was more like that, actually.
This sounds vaguely familiar, so I think probably yes. Yeah, like I don't even think that you necessarily need a grid for most of this. Like, you can apply one if you want to, but all of this is more narrative stuff. Like, it's more theater of the mind. Here's the structure of a rule set, and you operate with that.
Yeah, which I appreciate, because, I mean, that means, like, let's say if you're playing on a VTT, you could have, like, a cool image up, and you don't have to worry about stuff. You could have, like, a couple clocks, or you could just pull out, like, your drawing pen. Whereas playing IRL, obviously it's like dice, or just take the whiteboard out and start mucking stuff up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what they give you is a pretty good base to work with to make these more narrative scenes. There is part of me that wishes there was a bit more to it, but everything I want is just like Starship customization stuff that is coming in a different book. I think this basis works for just creating a narrative situation. Specifically, it works for creating a narrative situation that isn't just combat, because even if you had those Starship rules, you would need like some ideas for something to do outside of combat, and I think this really helps with that. And I mean, they call it cinematic for a reason, right? Like, it's not a game in the tactical sense. It's not like setting out the board and rolling dice and moving around and positioning and everything like that. It's just the narrative situation, it's the imagination. It's the Star Trek thing where everyone shakes around when there's an explosion on the ship. Like, it's telling a story using turn order and just describing things with dice rolls, as opposed to the more deeper mechanical tactical stuff.
Yeah, I like it. I like it because, those scenes are also valid in the fantasy of cool sci-fi space stuff, right? Like, you get the ship, you get the panning shot with all the people in the deck, you got the engineer running around in the engine. I feel like that guy has the worst job. Like, every time they're like doing so much, and everyone else is just like on computers or like in a chair, and I'm like, it's always somebody popping up from a panel doing this. Like, press this button, you could die at any moment. Like, working with basically like a nuclear bomb, right? That's just fueling your ship, right? Like, if you're moving a starship, it's basically could explode, right? Like, so,
yeah.
I mean, like, difficulties aside of a whole crew, but like I always think like the engineering scenes are always just like, what the hell? These people are being paid the same, like, like.
I'm down here with a wrench.
Yeah. Gotta have a scene with a big wrench where someone has to like manually like pull something. You're like, just like, you know, like it's a weird thing. We need to have the fun too, right? So there's your fun.
I like this system. The only criticism I have of it is that it's something that we know is going to be published later. So I do want to try like some test runs of it, but in general I like it.
The only criticism I have, Calvin, is you're impatient.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Well, I think also too, like as an introductory thing, if people are picking up Starfinder 2 for the first time and they're like, I want to try this out, right? It's a lot easier of a jump in versus like learning a whole new tactical system, right? Because at this point, if you're doing a bunch of stuff, like you've probably been rolling dice, you kind of understand like what stats mean, and like you've been through a couple of like narrative things. You definitely done combat because like, you know, this book is half combat, but that jumping off point, I think it's easier to structure it like this. And then if people want to get to like the nitty gritty, like now this is like a game, right? Like we're not just kind of putting numbers to the narrative, like now we're actually trying to outmaneuver each other like on a map. Then go for it. But I think like the introductory, I think it's good to start relatively simple, and like people could get overwhelmed pretty easy, right? Like it's just like, I will never do ship combat because it's like too much math, right?
Yeah.
Like, but now they have an option. Before they never even had an option.
You know, you're right. I think that does make sense. I was also just thinking like, in one of the Starfinder First Edition books, they do have alternate rules for if each player has their own small fighter ship, and then rules for doing like massive fleet combat. And I think you could do it with this, and it might be a little bit easier. You would have to scale it for the scene's different level. Like a fleet level combat would be a very high level encounter, I would think. But I think it might be easier to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Really just adjusting the target numbers and what they're trying to roll with, right? Like maybe instead of like the martial shooting skill, you have to use like a leadership skill, right? Because you're trying to coordinate your own battleship versus like maybe instead of it being like commands because you're trying to like command people, maybe it's like some other role if you're just a single pilot, right? Like you can adjust what the inputs are based on the context of like if it's one person, a whole group, or like a bunch of groups of people, and then but then the numbers will just even out depending on like what you're trying to do. Because like, you know, a dogfight with any old TIE fighter, like who cares, right? Like Han Solo can do that in his sleep, but like against Darth Vader, the kid, like I don't know, man, that's gonna be like a whole thing, right?
Yeah, and it might be easier to balance around those different narrative situations instead of having to make a tactical, you know, instead of having to build a customized starship or whatever. As much as I want that,
yeah, I mean,
I get it.
I mean, maybe I feel like you know, you want to have that 1v1 with the big bad. You put the tactical map, but like maybe not every, like it gives the option to have smaller encounters and things to be resolved. You know, in like a couple minutes, right? Like a couple of rolls, couple of scenes, things can play out, and then you're like, cool, that was a cool ship fight, and then you can like move the story on. But like for those big dramatic moments, like where there's a lot of stakes on board, like maybe you pull out tactical map and give that kind of option, right?
Yeah, like you want to get into it, and then you want that combat that takes an hour to resolve because it's a big deal.
That's where the tension, man. Darth Vader's gonna shoot you down. What you gonna do?
Yeah,
I'm mostly pulling from Star Wars because I don't know any other like thing. Like I was like I could talk about like the Expanse, but like I feel like Star Wars is closer to Starfinder than like Starfinder is to the Expanse. Like
yeah,
that's like the only other thing where I was like, oh man, you know what it is? Expanse, freaking Battlefleet, Lancer Battlefleet is that Kaitave worked on is way closer to that than Starfinder is, which is like the different flavors of science fantasy. But if you want a more hardcore or more, I guess, tactical, thinking about like distances and relativity and like things like that, and like a more science sci-fi thing, then obviously like is it Battlefleet or is it Battle Group?
Battle Group.
Battle Group, my bad. Battle Group, Battlefleet. I guess you're right. Maybe Battlefleet's already taken. But yeah, Lancer Battle Group. That one's really cool. There's another game that's like I forget, but Dragon Kid talked about it, and I was bewildered by how many rules it was to just like simulate accuracy of like space combat. Like it was wild. I'll find the link and I'll get Calvin to link it below. But like, woof, it was wicked.
Yeah, I guess there's room for both when it comes to tabletop gaming. But at least for this system overall, like I like it in general. I like how adaptable it can be. Anything I want to change, I feel like is going to be solved if I just wait for the Tech Core book to be out, whenever that is.
That's true. You could just make some stuff up too, Calvin. Don't. No, the players won't know anything. We don't even have any rule lawyers. Like, it's just...
Yeah, we can't yet.
Yeah, everyone's gonna be okay. Cool. Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I have no context for this, but it sounds fun. And I rolled. My die was high, and I did the thing I was gonna do, and then everybody cheered, and that's how TTRPGs work.
True. Oh, I mean, you know what? I'm just looking at it like the ranged weapon, for example. That's just a martial weapon. So if you find a martial weapon of similar level, then you can customize the gun or something like that. Or okay, well, now I'm going to be thinking about this.
Well, all you got to do is just make a fighter, right? But then turn it into a spaceship. But don't tell the players. And then you just rename all the action. You rename all the actions, and then you have it, right? And then you just make your own guy, and then you just reskin it. You just take an ogre, and then you reskin it, and then you just be like, "Hey, look at this ship! Isn't this cool, guys? Look, it has HP and an armor class and a dodge rating or whatever. You could just make up all sorts of shit, Calvin. The players don't know. I don't know."
I do like literal fighter starship.
Yeah, right. Like, I think that's pretty good. Just put the good old GM disguise on whatever this thing is, the stat block, and scratch out the name, and be like, put tie in front of it, TIE Fighter.
Classic GM trick. All right, Ramon, any last thoughts on Cinematic Starship Scenes?
No, I think they're cool. I'm always down for like a robust narrative system where there's clear things for the players to do and room to improvise and things like that. Like I'm always down for that.
Cool. All right, folks, below in the comments, if you're on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere else, just let us know, how do you feel about Cinematic Starship Scenes, and how many times can you repeat that in 10 seconds?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing from the people. Hope that you guys are playing some good Starfinder games out there, or enjoying the new rules, or getting inspired to run your own game. Starfinder's cool, Paizo's cool, Pathfinder's cool, TTRPGs are cool. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty happy with the abundance of options we have to have fun, but also, damn, I wish I had more time.
Yeah. Ain't it always the way? I haven't seen a lot of people talking about Cinematic Starship Scenes, so I kind of want to, hopefully we can be part of getting that conversation going, because I would like to see how other people feel about it, or if they've run it, how it worked out for them.
Well, Calvin, if you ever want to take it a spin, I think probably the people would like it to see that, so I don't know.
True.
Maybe it's something we do.
Maybe.
But I will not be thumbing the scales on this one, folks.
Yeah, we'll figure something out for the future, but there's, as you said, there is a lot of games to run and very little time to do so. All right, well, that's going to be the episode for this week. Thanks a ton for hanging out and listening. Again, if you're into Starfinder 2nd Edition, just let us know in the comments how you feel about the game, if you've played it yet, made any characters or anything like that. As well, if you're looking below in the description, we have a bunch of different Lancer writers and creators linked below if you're into the Lancer RPG, as well as a bunch of different other games. Specifically Dawn, I want to shout out, because there was the announcement last week about the physical version of it coming out next year. So go ahead and check that out as well. You can pre-order that. In addition, I wanted to shout out some other channels. By the time you're hearing this will have already happened, but I am showing up on the Masks and Mayhem channel once again, playing Overcharge during some very dramatic stuff that is happening. She is back in prison, as she should be, but after the events of the latter half of the Masks and Mayhem podcast, there may be certain things happening in that setting that everyone has to deal with now. So go ahead and check out that stream. I'll link to it below if the link is available. And Ramon, you've got some games to talk about as well.
I know. Hey guys, you guys like card games and mecha? I have a game for you. I'm working on a game with NHB Shaka, aka Trey, who is super cool and super awesome. Love that guy. And we're making a game called Mechanized Body. It is a TTRPG where you build a mech and you pilot it using cards. So your pilot has a deck of maneuvers that they use to defeat their enemies on the battlefield. Cool laser beams and lots of cool beam sword action. So if you're interested in that, follow the link in the doobly-doo, join the Discord, and it'll be super awesome. We're running games all the time. We're always looking for new players, and the game's looking pretty good, actually. We got some cool, sick art. And the other game is Project Versus, which is due for a name change. I don't know. I've been not feeling Project Versus anymore. I think now it should just be like an actual thing. But it's a cool fighting game inspired TTRPG where every fist and kick and punch and maneuver count. You're going back and forth beating up bad guys in the streets, these mean streets. So if you want to check that out, that's on the Woombit Dice website. I look forward to seeing you guys in the Discords or hearing about the game. If you guys are planning to check it out, I would love to hear some feedback.
Yeah. So check out all those links, check out all those games. Let us know how your games are going, because we always love hearing about those stories. But that's going to do it for this week. For all of our Cinematic Starship GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.